Most people live their lives chasing this invisible carrot called happiness. They wake up every morning thinking, if I just get this one thing, if I just fix this one part of my life, then I'll finally be happy. And here's the brutal truth: that belief, that endless search for happiness, is exactly what ruins your life. Think about it. The harder you chase happiness, the more it runs away from you. The more you try to force yourself into being happy, the more miserable you actually feel. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. The problem isn't that happiness is bad. The problem is that you've been lied to about what happiness actually is. Society, Instagram, self-help books, they've all convinced you that happiness is some permanent emotional state, this magical place where everything finally feels perfect. But that version of happiness doesn't exist. And the more you chase it, the more you sabotage yourself. Because here's the paradox: the pursuit of happiness makes you unhappy. The pursuit of happiness sounds like the most logical goal in life, but the irony is that the more you chase it, the more it escapes you. People convince themselves that if they just fix one more thing, earn a little more money, buy one more luxury, or achieve one more milestone, they'll finally be happy. This belief feels natural because we're taught from childhood that life is about achieving happiness, as though it's a destination you can reach and then stay in forever. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. When you put happiness at the center of everything, you create a standard that can never truly be met. Happiness is not a permanent state. It's fleeting, fragile, and constantly shifting. The moment you make it the finish line, you set yourself up for endless disappointment, because every time you cross one finish line, another one appears in the distance. Imagine running on a treadmill. You're running as hard as you can, sweating, pushing, exhausting yourself, and yet you remain in the same spot. This is what happens when you chase happiness. It becomes a treadmill of desire. You achieve something you thought would make you happy, and for a moment it does. But soon your brain adapts, and the joy fades. Suddenly, the car you bought just feels like a car, the promotion you fought for feels like another job, and the relationship you dreamed of feels normal. Now you need another achievement, another possession, another moment to keep the feeling alive. You're stuck in a cycle where the happiness you chase is always just out of reach, and that constant dissatisfaction eats away at you. The more you demand happiness, the more pressure you put on yourself. Every time you feel sad or anxious, you see it as proof that you're failing. You think something's wrong with you because you're not in that perfect, happy state you've been told you should always be in. This turns normal human emotions into enemies. Instead of simply feeling them and moving on, you dwell on them, obsess over them, and spiral deeper into frustration. The pursuit of happiness doesn't just fail to make you happy. It amplifies your misery because it convinces you that unhappiness is unacceptable. The paradox is clear. Chasing happiness makes you unhappy precisely because happiness is not something that can be directly pursued. It's a byproduct of living in alignment with your values, not a prize to be won. When you make happiness the goal, you stop living in the present moment. You're always leaning forward into the next thing, the next achievement, the next milestone, hoping that it will finally unlock the joy you've been missing. But the joy never comes in the way you expect because the moment you grasp it, your brain immediately adapts and resets the target. You end up living in a constant state of almost happy, but not quite, and that state becomes your normal existence. This is why people who seem to have it all often feel empty. They chased happiness with money, fame, or power, only to discover that it doesn't stick. They look around and wonder why they still feel unfulfilled despite achieving everything they thought would bring them joy. The problem isn't that they're broken. It's that happiness was never something they could capture in the first place. The pursuit itself was the trap, and the harder they chased it, the more miserable they became. Most people spend their lives running away from negative emotions as if sadness, fear, or anger are signs that something is fundamentally broken inside them. This mindset comes from the belief that life is supposed to feel good all the time and that happiness is the natural baseline of existence. But the reality is the exact opposite. Negative emotions are not failures, they are part of being human. They are signals from your body and mind telling you something about your values, your boundaries, or your circumstances. When you reject them and see them as problems, you only make them heavier and more unbearable. Think about sadness. When someone you love leaves or when life doesn't go as planned, sadness is the natural response. It tells you that you cared, that you were invested, that something mattered to you. Without sadness, you would be numb to loss and detached from meaning. The pain itself is proof of connection and significance. Yet many people interpret sadness as weakness or as evidence that their lives are failing. They try to cover it with forced positivity, distractions, or quick fixes, but by doing so they miss the lesson sadness is trying to teach. It is not a failure, it is a signpost pointing toward what you value most. The same is true of fear. Fear exists to protect you, to alert you that something matters enough to make you vulnerable. Without fear, there would be no courage, because courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward in spite of it. Yet, in a culture obsessed with happiness and comfort, fear gets treated like a defect that must be eliminated. People avoid challenges because they're afraid, but in avoiding them, they also avoid growth. Fear is not evidence that you're broken, it's evidence that you're standing at the edge of something important. Anger, too, is often misunderstood. Anger is the body's way of signaling that a boundary has been crossed or that something is unjust. Without anger, there would be no drive to stand up for yourself or fight for what's right. But instead of listening to it, many people either suppress it completely or let it explode destructively, both of which are unhealthy extremes. Anger itself is not the problem, it's how you respond to it. Treating anger as a failure blinds you to the fact that it's actually information, a guidepost to what you will and will not tolerate in your life. When you chase happiness as the only acceptable state, you turn all of these natural emotions into enemies. You convince yourself that feeling sad, scared, or angry means something is wrong with you, which creates a double layer of suffering. First, the pain of the emotion itself, and second, the shame of believing you shouldn't feel it. This is why people often spiral when they're unhappy. They're not only feeling the sadness or the fear, they're also criticizing themselves for having those feelings at all. It's like carrying a heavy weight and then berating yourself for not being able to carry it perfectly. But the truth is, negative emotions are not only normal, they are necessary. They create contrast, depth, and richness in life. Without them, happiness would lose its meaning entirely. If you felt good all the time, you wouldn't recognize it as happiness. You'd simply feel nothing. It's the struggle, the darkness, the pain that gives joy its light. By labeling negative emotions as failures, you rob yourself of the very experiences that shape resilience, empathy, and wisdom. The people who grow the most are not the ones who avoid suffering, but the ones who learn to face it, feel it, and understand it. Most people fall into the trap of believing that happiness can be reached through accumulation. They think if they can just get more money, more recognition, more possessions, or more comfort, they will finally feel complete. It feels intuitive to assume that happiness lives on the other side of more, because society constantly bombards us with messages that reinforce the idea. Advertisements tell you that buying a certain product will make you feel special. Social media feeds convince you that the people with bigger houses or flashier lifestyles are happier than you. The culture you live in conditions you to equate success with accumulation and accumulation with happiness. But this is one of the greatest illusions people fall for, and the longer they chase it, the emptier they feel. The reason more doesn't work is because of the way the human brain adapts. When you achieve something you've wanted for a long time, you get a burst of excitement, satisfaction, and pride. It feels incredible for a while, but then your mind normalizes it. What was once new and exciting becomes ordinary and expected. That car you dreamed of eventually becomes just your car. The new house you were thrilled about becomes just the place where you live. The job promotion that once lit you up becomes just another job with new problems. This process is called hedonic adaptation, and it ensures that no matter how much you accumulate, the thrill wears off and you're left chasing the next big thing. This cycle is endless because your desires don't disappear after they are satisfied, they expand. Each new achievement sets a new standard. Instead of gratitude, you begin to feel restless. Instead of contentment, you feel pressure to outdo yourself again and again. More money leads to more expensive desires. More success leads to greater expectations. More comfort leads to more dependence on comfort. You end up locked in a loop where happiness is always postponed to the next milestone, and even when you get there, it slips through your fingers. The illusion of more is especially dangerous because it feels like progress while actually keeping you stuck. You think you're improving your life by accumulating things, but what you're really doing is feeding an addiction. The rush of getting something new is like a drug high. It feels powerful for a moment, but then it fades and you're left craving another hit. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives on this treadmill, never realizing that the problem was never about not having enough, but about believing that enough was even possible through external gains. The truth is that happiness cannot be built on external accumulation because external things can always be taken away. Money can disappear, careers can end, possessions can be lost, comfort can vanish, and status can crumble. If your sense of well-being depends on things that fragile, your happiness will always be fragile too. You'll live in constant fear of losing what you've gained and constant dissatisfaction with what you haven't yet achieved. Real stability doesn't come from piling on more, but from learning to find value in less, from shifting your attention away from chasing what you don't have toward appreciating what you do. The paradox is that people often feel the most peace not when they have more, but when they simplify. When they stop comparing themselves to others, when they let go of the race to accumulate, when they focus on meaning, relationships, and purpose instead of possessions, comfort, and status. Because more is an illusion, but presence is real. And as long as you keep believing that your happiness lies in having more, you will always feel like you don't have enough, no matter how much you achieve. When people think about the happiest or most meaningful parts of their lives, they often imagine moments of joy, excitement, or success. But when they look deeper, they realize that the experiences that shaped them the most weren't necessarily happy at all. Some of the most important parts of life are filled with struggle, discomfort, and even pain. The sleepless nights working toward a goal, the heartbreak of losing someone you loved, the failures that forced you to grow stronger. These moments don't fit the conventional picture of happiness, yet they carry a weight that happiness alone could never provide. Meaning has always been greater than happiness because meaning endures while happiness fades. Happiness is temporary. It comes and goes, often without warning, like weather. You might feel happy one day and empty the next, even if nothing has changed in your life. If happiness is the only thing you're chasing, you'll constantly be disappointed by how fleeting it is. Meaning, however, has depth. It isn't about a feeling in the moment, it's about the story you tell yourself about your life. You may not enjoy the grind of working hard, but the meaning you attach to that work, the idea that you're building something, improving yourself, or supporting your loved ones, creates a sense of fulfillment that happiness can never replicate. Think about people who dedicate themselves to raising children. Much of parenthood is exhausting, stressful, and often frustrating. It doesn't look like happiness in the traditional sense, yet most parents will tell you it's the most meaningful experience of their lives. The sleepless nights and endless responsibilities don't make them happy, but they give their lives a sense of purpose that runs far deeper than comfort or pleasure. The same can be said for anyone who commits to a difficult passion, serves others, or works toward a goal that takes years of effort. The process might be uncomfortable, but the meaning makes it worthwhile. Meaning also gives you resilience in ways happiness never could. Happiness vanishes the moment life gets hard, but meaning can carry you through pain. If someone's only pursuit is happiness, then suffering feels unbearable because it stands in the way of their goal. But if someone is living for meaning, suffering becomes part of the journey. An athlete training for years knows the struggle is not pleasant, but the meaning of becoming stronger, competing, and pushing limits transforms that suffering into something valuable. A person who loses a loved one knows grief is heavy, but the meaning of love and memory makes the pain worth bearing. In this way, meaning takes the sharp edge off suffering by giving it a reason to exist. Another difference between happiness and meaning is how they affect other people. Happiness tends to be self-focused. It's about how you feel in the moment. Meaning is outward-facing. It often comes from contributing to others, from loving, creating, or building something beyond yourself. Happiness asks, what do I want right now? While meaning asks, what is worth enduring for the long run? That shift in perspective creates a life that feels anchored, even when happiness is absent. When you look back at your life, it won't be the easy, happy moments that define you. It will be the challenges you faced, the sacrifices you made, the growth you achieved, and the love you gave. These are not always comfortable, but they are the things that give your life weight and depth. To live only for happiness is to live shallowly, avoiding discomfort and seeking only the next pleasant distraction. To live for meaning is to embrace the full range of human experience, including the struggles that shape you into someone stronger and wiser. Happiness is often imagined as a prize waiting at the end of a long road, something you reach after ticking off the right boxes: success, wealth, relationships, recognition. But the truth is, happiness was never meant to be the main destination. It was never meant to be the thing you chase directly, because the more you obsess over it, the more it slips away. Happiness is not a goal in itself. It is a byproduct, a natural side effect of living a life that actually matters. When you spend your days aligned with your values, when you pursue growth instead of comfort, when you contribute to something larger than yourself, moments of happiness emerge on their own. They show up not because you demanded them, but because you earned them through meaning and responsibility. The problem comes when people make happiness the ultimate aim. They start asking themselves constantly, am I happy right now? And the act of measuring happiness, of monitoring it every moment, kills the very experience they're chasing. It's like checking your pulse every 5 seconds while trying to run. You're so busy measuring that you can't actually live. By trying to control and guarantee happiness, you end up strangling it. The moments that make life beautiful, laughter with friends, the satisfaction of finishing a hard project, the pride of overcoming a fear, these moments don't come from demanding happiness. They happen when you are fully engaged in life, when your attention is on what matters instead of how you feel. This is why people often report being happiest when they're not thinking about happiness at all. When they are completely absorbed in something, a passion, a creative project, a meaningful conversation, they forget about themselves for a while. They stop asking if they're happy and simply experience life as it unfolds. That immersion, that state of being present, creates a sense of joy and fulfillment that no amount of chasing could ever provide. In contrast, those who are constantly checking in with themselves, constantly worrying about whether they're happy enough, find themselves more anxious and less satisfied because they've made happiness into a test they can never pass. Happiness also appears most naturally when you embrace struggle that matters to you. Building a business, training for a marathon, raising a family, working on an art form, none of these are comfortable or consistently pleasant. They demand effort, sacrifice, and perseverance. But because you care deeply about them, the hard work transforms into meaning. And in those moments of meaning, small flashes of happiness arise. They come as gratitude in the middle of exhaustion, laughter in the middle of difficulty, pride in the middle of setbacks. Those fleeting moments are real, and they're sweeter because they weren't the point, they were the reward. By contrast, when you make happiness the goal, you try to skip over the struggle. You want joy without effort, pleasure without sacrifice, fulfillment without risk. But life doesn't work that way. Without struggle, there is no growth. Without sacrifice, there is no love. Without risk, there is no reward. Happiness shows up only when you're willing to embrace the full picture of life, the ups and downs, the wins and losses. It is earned indirectly, through your willingness to live deeply and face discomfort instead of running from it. The paradox is that the less you care about happiness, the more you experience it. When you shift your focus toward responsibility, purpose, and growth, happiness becomes a natural outcome. When you make it the sole objective, it becomes impossible to reach. It's not the result of chasing pleasure or avoiding pain, it's the quiet echo of a life lived with integrity and meaning. The people who feel the most fulfilled are not those who demanded happiness from the world, but those who dedicated themselves to something greater than themselves and found happiness showing up quietly along the way. The idea of happiness becomes a burden when it's treated like a constant obligation, but the moment you let go of that obsession, you discover freedom. Chasing happiness keeps you stuck in a loop of constant self-evaluation, always wondering whether you're doing life right, always asking if you've achieved enough, always comparing your reality to some imagined ideal. It turns life into a scoreboard where you measure every moment against how happy you're supposed to feel. But once you stop casing and start living, you're free to experience life without that weight. You no longer need to measure every day against a perfect standard, and that shift opens space for something real. When you stop demanding that life deliver happiness, you create room for acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up or settling. It means you allow reality to be what it is instead of constantly wishing it were different. When sadness shows up, you feel it. When fear arises, you acknowledge it. When joy comes, you enjoy it without grasping. You stop treating emotions like a problem to be solved and instead treat them like weather, sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, but always temporary. In this way, you start to live more fully because you're no longer at war with yourself or with life. This freedom also allows you to take risks and face challenges without the constant pressure of, will this make me happy? When happiness is no longer the measure of success, you're able to pursue things because they matter to you, not because they guarantee pleasure. You can start a difficult project, step into an uncertain relationship, or make a bold decision knowing that even if it's not always pleasant, it will still add richness to your life. By removing happiness as the ultimate requirement, you give yourself permission to engage with life honestly and courageously. Think about children at play. They're not constantly asking themselves if they're happy. They're immersed in the game, in the moment, in the process. Their joy doesn't come from chasing happiness. It comes from presence. As adults, we lose that instinct because we get caught up in evaluation. We worry about whether we're doing life correctly, whether we're happy enough, whether we measure up to others. But if you strip away the obsession, you can rediscover the same presence children have. You can work, love, create, and connect without needing to constantly measure the payoff. What happens then is that happiness begins to appear naturally, not forced, not demanded, not scheduled, but as a side effect of being alive and engaged. When you're not chasing it, you're more likely to stumble upon it in small, unexpected ways, a conversation that makes you laugh, a quiet moment of peace after a hard day, the pride of overcoming something difficult. These moments can't be manufactured, but they can be noticed and appreciated when you're not fixated on chasing a bigger, permanent version of happiness. Living without the obsession for happiness doesn't mean living without joy. It means living without the constant anxiety of trying to hold on to joy forever. It's about realizing that life isn't supposed to feel good all the time, and that's okay. The ups and downs are what give it texture and depth. When you embrace that reality, you stop running after an illusion and start noticing what's already in front of you. And that simple shift from chasing to living is what brings peace, meaning, and a quieter, more lasting kind of happiness that was never available when you were obsessed with finding it.